The Garden of Second Chances. Jonathan Pierce had built his fortune on walls. Literally. At 56, he was the most sought-after architect in America, specializing in gated communities, private estates, and luxury compounds designed to keep the world out. His own home was his masterpiece, a modernist fortress in the hills overlooking Los Angeles. All concrete, steel, and one-way glass. 10,000 square feet of carefully controlled space where nothing grew, nothing changed, nothing surprised him. "Mr. Pierce, the Sanderson project needs your approval." His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Jonathan barely looked up from his drafting table, where he was designing yet another wall. This one for a tech billionaire who wanted to ensure his Malibu estate was completely private. "Tell them to add another 2 feet to the perimeter. And reinforce the gate mechanism." "Yes, sir." It was a Tuesday in March when Jonathan's carefully controlled world began to crack. He was driving home from a client meeting when he took a wrong turn, something that never happened. His GPS had malfunctioned, and pride prevented him from admitting he was lost. He found himself in a neighborhood he didn't recognize. Not the manicured streets of his usual haunts, but an older part of the city. Modest homes with peeling paint, chain-link fences, cars that had seen better days. And then he saw it. In the middle of this forgotten neighborhood, surrounded by concrete and neglect, was an explosion of color. A community garden, wild and abundant, spilling over its borders like joy refusing to be contained. Jonathan slowed his Mercedes, staring. It was chaos. Vegetables growing next to flowers, hand-painted signs, mismatched garden beds, a rainbow of colors that offended his architectural sensibilities, and yet he couldn't look away. An elderly black woman was working in one of the beds, her silver hair wrapped in a bright purple scarf. She looked up, caught him staring, and waved. Jonathan, embarrassed, drove away quickly. But that night, alone in his fortress, he couldn't stop thinking about that garden, about the way life had insisted on growing in the cracks of the city, about the woman's wave, so casual, so friendly, as if she'd been expecting him. Jonathan told himself he wouldn't go back, but 3 days later, he found himself driving through that neighborhood again. This time, deliberately. The garden was even more vibrant in the morning light. There were people working. An elderly man watering tomatoes, a young mother with a baby strapped to her back, pulling weeds, teenagers painting a new sign. And there was the woman in the purple scarf, directing operations like a general commanding an army of flowers. Jonathan parked and got out, not sure what he was doing. "Well, look who came back," the woman called out, smiling. "I'm Dolores Washington. Welcome to the Miracle Garden." Jonathan Pierce. He shook her hand, surprised by her strong grip. "I was just passing by." That's what they all say." Her eyes twinkled with knowing humor. "Then they stay for 20 years. You know anything about gardening?" "No, I'm an architect." "Even better. We need someone to design a proper tool shed. Ours is falling apart." She gestured to a ramshackle structure that looked like a strong wind would demolish it. "I don't do sheds," Jonathan said automatically. "I design luxury residences." "Oh, excuse me, Mr. Fancy." Dolores laughed, not offended in the slightest. "Well, if you change your mind, we're here every day, sunup to sundown." Jonathan should have left. Should have gotten back in his Mercedes and returned to his world of clean lines and controlled spaces. Instead, he heard himself ask, "What is this place?" Dolores's expression softened. "This used to be a vacant lot. Drugs, crime, dumping ground. 10 years ago, I got tired of looking at it, so I planted some tomatoes. Then Mrs. Chen next door planted some bok choy. Then Mr. Rodriguez brought pepper seeds from his hometown in Mexico, and it grew." She gestured to the abundant garden. "Now we've got 50 families with plots here. We grow food, we grow community, we grow hope. The city allows this. The city tried to shut us down 3 times. We fought back. This garden feeds people, Mr. Pierce. It gives kids a place to learn. It gives elders a purpose. It gives all of us a reason to believe that beauty can grow anywhere, even in concrete." Jonathan looked around with new eyes. He saw the careful organization beneath the apparent chaos. The irrigation system cobbled together from recycled materials, the composting area, the children's learning garden with hand-painted educational signs. It's impressive, he admitted. It's necessary, Dolores corrected. You hungry? We're about to have lunch. Community meal every Friday. I should go. You should stay. It wasn't a request. Jonathan found himself sitting on a weathered picnic bench, surrounded by people he would never normally encounter. Dolores served him a plate of food, vegetables from the garden, rice and beans, fresh tortillas. It was the best meal he'd had in years. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, climbed onto the bench beside him. Are you the wall man? Jonathan froze. What? Abuela says you build walls to keep people out. She looked at him with curious dark eyes. Why? Rosita, don't bother the man, an older Latina woman called out. She's not bothering me, Jonathan said, surprising himself. He looked at the little girl. I build walls because people want privacy, safety. But walls keep out the good stuff too, Rosita said matter-of-factly. Like friends, and sunshine, and tomatoes. She pointed to a vine heavy with red fruit. Tomatoes don't grow behind walls. Out of the mouths of babes, Jonathan thought. This 6-year-old had just articulated something he'd never considered in 30 years of architecture. Jonathan didn't plan to return to the Miracle Garden, but the next Friday, he found himself there again, and the Friday after that. Dolores put him to work. If you won't design us a shed, at least help me fix this fence. Jonathan, who hadn't done manual labor since college, found himself hammering posts and stretching wire. His expensive clothes got dirty, and something in his chest, something that had been tight for years, began to loosen. He learned the names of the gardeners, Mrs. Chen, who grew the most beautiful bok choy and spoke limited English but communicated perfectly through smiles and shared vegetables. Mr. Rodriguez, a retired mechanic who could fix anything and told stories about his village in Oaxaca. Young Marcus, a teenager who'd been in a gang until Dolores recruited him to build raised beds, and who now wanted to study agriculture. And Rosita, who appointed herself Jonathan's personal guide and asked him endless questions about buildings and walls and why grown-ups made things so complicated. Mr. Jonathan, why don't you smile more? She asked one day. I smile, he protested. Not really. Not like Abuela Dolores. She smiles with her whole face. Jonathan watched Dolores across the garden, laughing with a group of elders, and realized Rosita was right. Dolores smiled with her entire being, with joy, with presence, with a fullness of life he'd forgotten existed. That evening, as people were packing up, Dolores sat beside him on the bench. You're coming here a lot for a man who doesn't garden, she observed. I'm still figuring out why, Jonathan admitted. I can tell you why if you want to hear it. Please. You're lonely. You've built yourself a beautiful prison, and now you're looking for the door. Dolores's voice was gentle, not judgmental. I see it in people all the time. They think walls will keep them safe, but walls just keep them alone. Jonathan felt something crack inside him. My wife died 12 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry. We were going to travel. Garden, actually. She loved gardens, always wanted to grow things, but I was too busy building my career, designing houses for other people, and then she got sick, and there was no time left. His voice broke. After she died, I couldn't bear anything that grew. Anything that changed. So I built walls. Dolores took his hand. Baby, walls don't stop grief. They just trap it inside with you. Jonathan looked at this woman, this stranger who had somehow become important to him, and let himself cry for the first time in 12 years. After that conversation, something shifted. Jonathan started coming to the garden, not just on Fridays, but every day. He'd arrive early, before work, to water plants. He'd come during lunch to help with whatever needed doing. He'd stay late into the evening, learning to prune tomatoes from Mr. Rodriguez, practicing Mandarin with Mrs. Chen, playing with Rosita and the other children. His assistant was baffled. Mr. Pierce, you've canceled 3 client meetings this week. Reschedule them. But the Sanderson project can wait. Jonathan started bringing his drafting skills to the garden. He designed a proper tool shed, beautiful but functional, with recycled materials and a living roof. He created a rainwater collection system. He drew up plans for an expanded children's area with shade structures and learning spaces. Look at you, Mr. Fancy Architect, getting your hands dirty, Dolores teased. but her eyes were proud. One afternoon, Jonathan was helping Marcus build a new raised bed when the teenager said, "Mr. Pierce, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why do rich people need such big houses? Like, what do you do with all that space?" Jonathan paused, hammer in hand. "I don't know. I think we're trying to fill something. But space doesn't fill emptiness. It just makes it echo louder." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's deep, man." Jonathan laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. That evening, Dolores invited him to stay for a community meeting. There was tension in the air. "The city is selling this lot," Dolores announced, her voice heavy. "A developer wants to build luxury condos. We have 60 days before they break ground." The room erupted in dismay. Voices overlapped, anger, fear, desperation. "We can't lose this garden. Where will we grow food? This is our community." Jonathan felt rage building in his chest. He stood up. "Who's the developer?" "Some company called Pinnacle Development." Jonathan's blood ran cold. Pinnacle was one of his biggest clients. He'd designed 3 of their luxury projects. "I know them," he said quietly. "Let me make some calls." Jonathan spent the weekend reviewing contracts and making calls. What he discovered made him sick. Pinnacle had bought the lot for a fraction of its value from the city, which had classified it as blighted. They planned to build a gated community, ironically, one that Jonathan himself had been contracted to design. On Monday, he met with Richard Sanderson, Pinnacle's CEO, in a downtown high-rise. "Jonathan, good to see you. I assume you're here about the Miracle Garden project." "I'm here to ask you not to build there." Sanderson laughed. "What? Why?" "Because that garden is important. It feeds 50 families. It's a community hub. It's a vacant lot with some vegetables, Jonathan. We're going to build something valuable there. Luxury condos starting at $2 million. You've seen the designs. Your designs." "I don't want to do this project." Sanderson's expression hardened. "You're under contract. Then I'll break it. That'll cost you. Penalties, legal fees, reputation damage." "Jonathan, what's gotten into you? Since when do you care about community gardens?" "Since I remembered what matters." Jonathan stood. "I'm not designing this project. Find another architect." "You're making a huge mistake." "No," Jonathan said. "I've been making a mistake for 12 years. I'm finally correcting it." He walked out, his heart pounding. He'd just destroyed a multi-million-dollar contract, and probably his reputation. And he felt more alive than he had in years. When he arrived at the garden that afternoon, Dolores took one look at his face and said, "What did you do?" "I quit the project, but it's not enough. They'll just hire someone else." "So what do we do?" Jonathan smiled. "We fight, and I know exactly how." Over the next 2 weeks, Jonathan worked harder than he'd ever worked in his life. But instead of designing walls, he was tearing them down. He researched zoning laws and found loopholes. He connected Dolores with nonprofit organizations that could help. He used his architectural credentials to testify at city council meetings about the value of urban green spaces. He also did something he'd never done before. He designed for free. He created a comprehensive plan for the Miracle Gardens expansion. Community center, educational spaces, a commercial kitchen where they could process and sell their produce, affordable housing integrated with green space. "This is beautiful," Dolores said, looking at his drawings. "But baby, we can't afford this." "You don't have to. I'm funding it." "Jonathan, my wife Sarah left me a lot of money. I've been sitting on it for 12 years, afraid to touch it because it felt like letting her go. But I think she'd want this. She'd love this." His voice cracked. "Let me do this, please." Dolores hugged him tight. "She'd be proud of you." The city council meeting was packed. Pinnacle brought lawyers and lobbyists, but the Miracle Garden brought something more powerful: community. Mrs. Chen testified in halting English about how the garden had given her purpose after her husband died. Mr. Rodriguez talked about how it had saved Marcus from gang life. Young mothers spoke about having fresh food for their children. Elders talked about having a place to belong. And Rosita, 7 years old and fearless, walked up to the microphone and said, "Please don't build walls where our tomatoes grow." The room was silent. Then Jonathan stood. "I'm Jonathan Pierce. I've spent 30 years designing walls and gates and barriers. I've made millions helping wealthy people separate themselves from the world. And I was wrong. He presented his alternative plan, the expanded garden, the community center, the affordable housing. This lot can be developed, but it can be developed for the community, not against it. It can be a place that builds connections instead of walls, that grows food and hope instead of profit and isolation. Mr. Pierce, a council member said, this is a dramatic change from your usual work. Why should we believe you're serious? Because I'm donating $5 million to make it happen. And because a little girl taught me that tomatoes don't grow behind walls. The vote was close, but in the end, the community won. 6 months later, Jonathan stood in the transformed Miracle Garden, watching the grand opening celebration. The new community center was beautiful, modern but warm, with walls of windows that brought the garden inside, and a design that welcomed rather than excluded. Children ran through the expanded play area. Elders sat in the shade of new pergolas. The commercial kitchen hummed with activity as volunteers prepared food from the garden's harvest. And in the center of it all was a new memorial garden, with a plaque that read, "In memory of Sarah Pierce, who believed that beauty should be shared, not hoarded." Dolores found him there, standing quietly. She'd love this. I hope so. I wasted so much time. You're not wasting it now. Dolores squeezed his arm. That's what matters. Rosita ran up, breathless. The tomatoes are ready. He let her pull him to the garden beds, where fat red tomatoes hung heavy on the vine. She picked one and handed it to him. Taste it. It's better than anything from a store. Jonathan bit into the sun-warmed tomato, and the flavor exploded in his mouth, sweet, tangy, alive. He thought about his fortress home, his carefully controlled life, all the years he'd spent keeping the world out. You're right, he told Rosita. It's perfect. That evening, after the celebration wound down, Jonathan and Dolores sat on a bench, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. What are you going to do now? Dolores asked. You can't go back to building walls after this. I'm not going to. I'm starting a new firm, community-focused architecture, affordable housing, public spaces, projects that bring people together instead of separating them. That's going to cost you clients. The ones I want to lose. Jonathan smiled. I'm also selling my house. It's too big, too empty. I'm going to build something smaller. With a garden. Now you're talking. Dolores patted his hand. You know, when you first showed up here, I thought you were just another rich man having a midlife crisis, slumming it with the poor folks to feel better about yourself. What changed your mind? You did. You showed up, you did the work, you listened, you let yourself be changed. She looked at him with affection. That takes courage, baby. Real courage. I was so lost, Jonathan admitted. I'd built this perfect life that was perfectly empty. And I didn't even realize it until I saw this garden, until I met you. Gardens have a way of teaching us what matters. You can't rush a tomato. You can't control the weather. You can't build a wall around growth. You just have to show up, do the work, and trust the process. Is that what you did, after your husband died? Dolores nodded. I was angry at the world, angry at God, angry at that vacant lot full of trash. So I planted some seeds, just to have something to be angry at that might actually grow into something beautiful. And it did. The garden saved my life. It saved mine too, Jonathan said quietly. A year later, Jonathan's life was unrecognizable. He'd sold his fortress and built a modest home on the edge of the city. 2 bedrooms, an open floor plan, and a half-acre garden where he grew vegetables and flowers. His new architecture firm, Second Chances Design, was thriving. He specialized in community projects, affordable housing with shared green spaces, community centers, urban farms. He made less money, but slept better at night. And he spent every Friday at the Miracle Garden, which had become a model for urban agriculture programs across the country. One Friday afternoon, as he was teaching a group of teenagers about sustainable design, a woman approached him. She was perhaps 40, with kind eyes and paint-stained hands. Mr. Pierce? I'm Amanda Chen, Mrs. Chen's daughter. My mother talks about you constantly. Your mother is wonderful. Her bok choy is legendary. Amanda laughed. She wanted me to meet you. She thinks we'd get along. I'm an artist. I do community murals. Jonathan looked at this woman, creative, community-minded, with her mother's warm smile, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Interest. Possibility. Would you like to see the new mural we're planning for the community center? He asked. I'd love to. As they walked through the garden, talking about art and architecture and the ways beauty could heal communities, Jonathan caught Dolores watching them with a knowing smile. That evening, after Amanda left, Dolores cornered him. She's lovely. She is, Jonathan admitted. Sarah would approve. How do you know? Because Sarah loved you enough to want you to be happy, and you're finally ready to be happy again. Jonathan felt tears prick his eyes. I miss her every day. Of course you do. Love doesn't end just because life does. But love also doesn't mean stopping living. It means carrying what they taught us forward. Dolores gestured to the garden around them. This is your love letter to Sarah. Every plant, every person fed, every community built. You're honoring her by finally living the way she wanted you to live. When did you get so wise? Baby, I've been wise. You just finally started listening. 2 years after Jonathan first stumbled upon the Miracle Garden, he stood at a podium, accepting an award from the American Institute of Architects for his community-focused work. For 30 years I built walls, he told the audience of his peers. I designed fortresses for people who wanted to keep the world out. I was very successful. I was also very wrong. He told them about the Miracle Garden, about Dolores and Rosita and Mrs. Chen, about learning that architecture should bring people together, not separate them, about discovering that true wealth isn't measured in square footage or property values, but in community, connection, and the courage to grow. A little girl once asked me why I built walls. She said walls keep out the good stuff. Friends, sunshine, tomatoes. She was right. So I stopped building walls and started building bridges, gardens, communities, and in the process, I found my way back to life. The standing ovation was thunderous, but the moment that mattered most came later, at the celebration dinner, when Rosita, now 9 years old and still asking impossible questions, climbed into the chair beside him. Mr. Jonathan, are you happy now? He thought about his life, the meaningful work, the community he'd found, Amanda, who had become his partner in both business and life, the garden that had saved him. Yes, Rosita, I'm happy now. Good, you smile with your whole face now, like Abuela Dolores. Jonathan laughed and hugged her. Thank you for teaching me about tomatoes. But, Mr. Jonathan? Yes? When are you going to marry Miss Amanda? Abuela says you're taking too long. Jonathan nearly choked on his water. Across the table, Amanda was laughing, and Dolores was looking entirely too innocent. Soon, he promised. Very soon. 5 years after that wrong turn changed his life, Jonathan stood in the Miracle Garden on a perfect spring morning. The garden had tripled in size, with satellite locations in 3 other neighborhoods. His architecture firm had designed them all. Today, the garden was decorated with flowers and ribbons. Chairs were set up in rows, because today, Jonathan was marrying Amanda in the place where he'd learned to live again. Dolores, now 78, and still running the garden with an iron fist and a loving heart, officiated the ceremony. We gather here today in this garden, she began, because gardens teach us the most important lessons, that growth takes time, that the best things in life can't be controlled or rushed. They can only be nurtured with patience, presence, and love. Jonathan looked at Amanda, radiant in a simple dress, and felt overwhelming gratitude. For wrong turns, for second chances, for the courage to tear down walls and plant gardens instead. After the ceremony, as guests celebrated with food from the garden and music and laughter, Rosita, now 11 and already taller than Mrs. Chen, found Jonathan. Mr. Jonathan, I have a question. Of course you do, he smiled. What is it? When I grow up, I want to be an architect like you, but I want to design gardens, not buildings. Is that okay? Jonathan knelt down to her level. Rosita, that's more than okay. That's perfect. The world needs more people who know how to grow things, who understand that the best architecture isn't about walls, it's about creating spaces where life can flourish. Will you teach me? It would be my honor. As the sun set over the Miracle Garden, Jonathan stood with Amanda's hand in his, surrounded by the community that had saved him, and thought about the man he'd been 5 years ago. Isolated, grieving, building walls to keep the world out. That man had been lost. But in a garden full of tomatoes and hope, he'd been found. He'd learned that walls don't protect us, they imprison us. That true security comes not from keeping others out, but from letting them in. That the richest life isn't measured in square footage or bank accounts, but in relationships nurtured, communities built, and love shared freely. He'd learned that it's never too late for a second chance, and that sometimes the wrong turn is exactly the right path. Dolores appeared beside him, handing him a ripe tomato. For luck. Jonathan bit into it, the flavor bursting on his tongue. Sweet, alive, perfect. Thank you, he said, for everything. Thank you for showing up, Dolores replied. For doing the work. For letting yourself be changed. Best wrong turn I ever took. Baby, Dolores said with a knowing smile, there are no wrong turns, only paths we're not ready to see yet. She was right, of course.